You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another 60 minutes of Skills World Live. And would you believe it? Today is exactly 10 years ago to the day that I was in New York City as the news started filtering through that Gordon Brown had lost the UK general election. For our listeners outside the UK, and I know we get quite a few of you, 2010 is the last time the British Labour Party was in power in Great Britain. For me, May 2010 all seems like only yesterday. Where did a whole decade go? Talking of politics, on tonight's show, we will be getting out of the confines of England's skills policy debates by talking to the Education Minister in Wales about her plans for further education. And we'll be talking to a range of informed guests about what they think the priorities for the UK skills sector should be. I'll be talking to the well-known independent training provider and entrepreneur, Angela Middleton, MBE, and I'll be asking her for some thoughts about the future priorities for FE. And in the closing segment of the show, I'll be talking to two policy nerds, and I say that in the most respectful of ways, as both Dr. Rebecca Conway of the Federation of Awarding Bodies and Mr. Ventura of the London School of Economics both will be reflecting with me about how COVID-19 will probably change the whole face of qualifications, skills and apprenticeships for many years to come. But first, let's find out what's making the news headlines in your skills world this evening. The Education Skills Funding Agency announced today that it is delaying the rollout of its flagship digital apprenticeship system until April 2021. The government quango had originally intended that all employers would be able to fund apprentices using the services by this November. But ESFA officials said today that due to the pandemic and the impact this has had on providers and non-levy paying employers, that the delay to rolling out the digital service would now have to take place. Unlike the current provider allocations approach to funding apprentices, the £10 million digital account scheme is designed to put more purchasing power in the hands of employers rather than providers. In other news, the Low Pay Commission has published a report today that calls for greater monitoring and compliance of the national minimum wage paid to apprentices. The Commission found that the age-related minimum rates are not always paid in full by employers. In the last year, this led to nearly a fifth of apprentices reporting being underpaid. The report also highlighted the confusion around paying apprentices for the hours spent training, which accounted for a large proportion of the underpayments, the Commission said. And finally, a college in the South Wales Valleys is doing its bit to support health and social care workers in the community by providing equipment and resources. Coleg e Comied, which has 4 campuses, including the Rhondda and Aberdare, has donated vital personal protective equipment, PPE, and has opened up its doors to NHS staff and learners to continue their studies remotely from home. The college has also donated over 350 bottles of hand sanitizer to frontline services. That's all your Skills World news from fenews.co.uk. Contact us at Skills World Live. Email skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Follow us on Twitter @Tom Buick, @FENews. Use the hashtag SkillsWorld. Call us on 02032 900 111. That's 02032 900 111.
Lady, took me down to where I've been lately. Yeah, her love can make a person hazy. Praying she won't break me down, 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 down. She makes me crazy. Never promise anything, but maybe I let her do anything, let her play me. She makes me go another round, 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 round. What are you doing to me now? You found a way to me somehow. Now you're all I ever dream about. Since I saw you, there's no easy way out. Hear me calling out to you. It's all that I can do. Baby, I am falling. Can't you hear me calling out to you? It's all that I can do. Tell me that you want me. Tell me that you need me. Baby, I am falling. Baby, hear me calling. Baby, I am falling. Baby, hear me calling. Lady, took me down to where I've been lately. Yeah, her love can make a person hazy. Praying she won't break me down. Yeah. What are you doing to me now? You found a way to me somehow. Now you're all I ever dream about. Since I saw you, there's no easy way out. Hear me calling out to you. It's all that I can do. Baby, I am falling. Can't you hear me calling out to you? It's all that I can do. Tell me that you want me. Tell me that you need me. Baby, I am falling. Baby, hear me calling. Baby, I am falling. Tell me that you want me. Tell me that you need me. Hear me calling out to you. It's all that I can do. Baby, I am falling. Can't you hear me calling out to you? It's all that I can do. Tell me that you want me. Tell me that you need me. Baby, I am falling. Baby, hear me calling.
That's a track called Hear Me Calling. Spring Gang with Easton. As I've said so many times on this programme, all our tracks are selected from the independent music site epidemicsound.com. So head over to there if you don't like the tracks I'm playing and stick your request in to skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Now tonight's big debate is on the theme of what should the skills priorities be for the UK skills sector. We've already discussed on this programme what the new normal might look like this September, but we are, without doubt, entering a new phase of this coronavirus challenge. As the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, prepares to tell the nation on Sunday how potentially some of the lockdown measures might be eased, one thing is now clear. It is going to take a gargantuan effort of setting a clear set of priorities for not only reopening our economy, but with it, the education and skills system. In post-16 education, there are more than 5 million students and apprentices across the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. And education and skills, of course, is a devolved policy area. So ministers in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England will all want to work with educators and employers on developing their own plans. On the programme this evening, we're going to start by looking at what Wales has planned for its own FE and skills system. Early this week, I spoke to the Welsh Government Minister, Kirsty Williams AM, about her priorities for FE in the country. After this next song by Elijah J and Pauline Froling, I'll play to you the Minister's interview. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News. Minister Kirsty Williams, you set out 5 principles last week for the Welsh Government in terms of when the schools might reopen. Have you got an update on the situation?
Yes, you're correct. We've outlined the principles that will guide any decision-making as we move to the next stage of education in Wales, remembering that actually we have 500 plus schools open every week in Wales, providing care and support for critical workers and our most vulnerable. And many of our FE colleges continue to support their learners in a variety of ways. Of course, at the forefront of my mind is the health and well-being of our children, young people and those that work with them. And that's our top priority. We also have to see any changes to the next phase of education in the context of wider government changes if we're to move out of lockdown. We need to, of course, enjoy the confidence of public. Families aren't going to send their learners back to institutions if they don't feel confident that it's safe to do so. And clearly, we need to think about the very practical application of how we deliver the next phase of education in a world where social distancing is going to be with us for some time. And obviously, in looking to operationalise things, we're working very closely with those on the front line, and that includes head teachers of schools, but we're also liaising with our FE partners, and the group that is advising me has representation from the FE college sector on it, because we'll want to move, if we can, in tandem, both schools and colleges.
Sure. I mean, the 4 countries across the UK, of course, have said that, the whole decision to open up colleges and schools needs to be led by the science. But as a minister that's obviously responsible for children's welfare, as well as their education, are you not concerned that the longer that the lockdown goes on, and I do appreciate obviously vulnerable kids can still go to school in Wales. I mean, schools are in that sense still open. But does it worry you that the longer it goes on, potentially it's quite damaging to children's education?
Well, of course, and from an education point of view, there is nobody keener than I to have learners back in institutions, but we need to do that in a very careful way. In the meantime, although we cannot hope to recreate classrooms and lecture halls in people's kitchens, we have a national policy that is entitled Stay Safe, Stay Learning, and we're looking to support children and young people in their education at this time. We're very fortunate in Wales. We have a strong base on which to build. For a number of years, we have developed, created and invested in a digital learning platform entitled Hub, which allows both practitioners and students a whole variety of platforms to carry on learning. We've been rolling that out to our FE college partners to ensure that students outside of school have access to those resources and online activities. And during this time, we are constantly putting new content onto that digital learning platform to support practitioners and learners. So, as I said, whilst inevitably there is significant disruption to learning at this moment, education professionals, both in schools and colleges, are working really, really hard to continue to support learning in a very different way during this time.
Let's talk about that, Minister, because you are leading the charge in Wales, looking at digital support, even pre-COVID-19, and that runs from school-aged children right up to further education. To what extent do you think that the current period we're all living through will really fundamentally change how teaching and learning takes place in Wales in the future?
Well, indeed. As I said, first of all, we were in a fortunate position to have a national platform in Hub, but we had also, for instance, been developing our e-school proposals. This allows students, predominantly who find themselves living in parts of rural Wales, where choices post-16 can be a challenge. So, for instance, we'd already invested heavily in our eSchool project that allows a student, for instance, in rural Ceredigion to study further maths A-level, even if they're the only person in the class, because those lessons are being delivered remotely from a different school. And so we are looking to extend provisions such as that, and also looking to see how what we learn in this crisis and how we develop pedagogy and approaches to digital learning can actually be taken forward. So when things do get back to normal, whatever the new normal looks like after this pandemic, that this learning can be carried forward. And I'm sure that there will be innovations that started here now in this terrible time that actually will have real benefits for when things, as I said, return to what looks like more like normal.
One of those innovations, of course, is curriculum for Wales. Again, you've been leading on a pretty ambitious post-16 framework. And I do believe you you're planning to put legislation before the Senate about the establishment of a new commission for tertiary education and research in Wales, which will oversee higher education as well as further education, sixth forms and work-based learning. Tell us more about that, your plans for that.
Yes, that's right. We have two important pieces of reform here in education in Wales. Firstly is the reform of our national curriculum that covers students up to the age of 16. But yes, you're right. Just before the pandemic broke, we were about to start scrutiny on our proposals for the establishment of a commission here in Wales, which brings all post-compulsory education and training together under the auspices of a single body, so that we can get the advantages of real synergy of all of those sectors working more closely together, enabling students and learners to move more seamlessly and eliminating some of those false distinctions, and to ensure that what we're offering post-compulsory education really meets the needs of our economy, but also what Wales as a society needs. Now, clearly, these are challenging times for parliaments across the world. Very fortunately, here in Wales, our parliament, our Senate, was the first to adopt online working and virtual meetings of our parliament, and we are hopeful that we will be able to proceed with our legislation should the parliamentary authorities be able to create that virtual platform for us to do it. I think it's even more important than ever that we push on with our reforms. Clearly, the post-compulsory education and training sector is going to be vital to the Welsh economy, indeed the UK economy, as we begin to rebuild our economy after this crisis. And work-based learning, FE colleges, HE and research are going to be more important than ever as we look to reskill, retrain and rebuild after the tremendous hit that our economy will have taken during this time.
Kirsty Williams, Cabinet Minister for Education in Wales. Thanks for joining Skills World Live.
My pleasure.
Subscribe to Skills World Live at fenews.co.uk/Skills World. That was Kirsty Williams there talking to me earlier this week. Now don't go away, because after this next song, I'll be talking to two people who have very interesting perspectives on what our priorities should be as we look to reopen the skills and education system. What is the impact going to be on students and employers? And how should we best prioritise their needs? Join me after this short musical break.
I've been waiting all my life for someone like you. I would watch the days go by, wasted and blue. I was out of use. Now every day, every night, every moment with you, I'm walking on air. And every day, every way, I feel I can't lose. I want
That was Crazy for Love. And it's by Craig Reaver with Emmy. So let's continue tonight's debate looking at what should the priorities be for the UK skills sector as we come out of lockdown. Joining us on the line is someone who started her career as a graduate trainee at BP Oil before founding the award-winning independent training provider MiddletonMurray in 2002. Since then, the company has grown into one of the largest apprenticeship and training providers in the UK, placing over 2,500 young professionals into their first jobs. The person I'm talking about, of course, is Angela Middleton, MBE, and she joined us on the line. Good evening, Angela.
Evening, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And also joining us on the line from Stoke-on-Trent College is Paige Harrison, who is a counsellor and Wellbeing coordinator. Good evening, Paige.
Hi, Tom. Are you okay?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Thank you to both of you for joining us live this evening. Now, Angela, let's start with you. What do you see as your biggest priority right now from a sort of training provider perspective?
Yeah, well, I think number one priority for us is to make sure that we give as much care and attention to those that are already on programme with us. So, we do a lot of different things. And as you rightly say, I started in 2002, and for a long time it was just a recruiter, and then we moved into training providers. And I always think, you've got to sort of always look after your current business, whatever that happens to be. And for us, we've got over 1,000 apprentices in probably nearly 700 different employers. And then we've got about 120 or 130 traineeships. So number one priority is to make sure in the last sort of 6-7 weeks, they're fully engaged. They know where we are. We've been delivering online to them, reassured them in all sorts of ways, really, and then really focused on getting them, continuing to get their progression. Yeah. And I think, many of them have sort of been wobbly about the future. And what we've emphasised so much is, look, you can't really control the future, but what you can control at the moment is your ability to improve your skills and make yourself even more marketable, and that's really what you ought to concentrate on. So that's been our number one priority.
Sure. Now, Paige, you work in a college, of course, supporting students. I mean, how has the lockdown impacted on, for example, the well-being of students at your college?
Well, we've noticed quite a change, really. At first, a lot of students found it quite difficult to talk over the phone, and, having that loss of motivation, that worry, lots of things around health anxiety, worrying about if the services are still going to be available. So we've had to take a proactive approach, really, to just ensure that, we're supporting students as best that we can. Especially, our values at Stoke-on-Trent College are access, achieve and aspire. So we have to make sure that we're taking those appropriate actions. Otherwise, we'd be sort of denying the students that chance to meet our values. Sure. So we've gone a lot of our sessions and things that we've been doing. Students are able to access virtually at the moment, just so they can ensure that they remain in more of a positive and motivated mindset to still achieve their, the college qualifications and still enable them to aspire into an employable role that they can be proud of as well.
Yeah. And on this subject of well-being, Angela, because, you're somebody that's actually, alongside all your brilliant entrepreneurial work, you've said a lot, you've wrote a lot as well, and you've done a lot just around, well-being and promoting, mental health. Have you got some reflections on the sort of impact that obviously COVID-19, the lockdown, is having on learners and on students? And how could we potentially, as with Paige and her work, support them more as we hopefully start to come out of this lockdown?
Well, yeah, I found a connection between sort of physical health and fitness, and your ability to sort of perform in business has got a very strong connection. And I sort of discovered that for myself probably, reasonably late in my career. 4 or 5 years ago, I got into weightlifting, which might seem a bit extreme, but it was transformational for me. I wasn't fit before, but I found something all of a sudden, and really sort of started to embrace the fitness regime. And then I realised that things were just so much more easy in business. And that's not because business got easier, it's because the way that I looked at things was very different. I became a lot more philosophical, a lot more confident that, no matter what the challenges were, I was going to be able to achieve them, or, sort of resolve them. And that led to me sort of sharing that philosophy a lot more with the people that actually work for me, number one, because I realised that a lot of these individuals, they were midlifers, they were, not performing maybe as much as they wanted to. I looked at them and I thought, well, why is that? Well, a lot of it is because they're stuck at their desk. They're not finding the time to sort of exercise during the day, not finding the time to sort of eat properly. And yet they're still expecting their mind to work optimally when their body isn't. And I sort of started to encourage them to do 10,000 steps and gave a lot more freedom to people. And then what we started to do then was to sort of embed that into our programs as well, with apprentices, traineeships, and anybody that we work with, even employers. I created a program which we give for free now to all employers and learners. And I think that it's so important to get your priorities straight. You can't control many things, particularly no one saw this coming. No matter how much people want to be in control and they want to strategize and plan and forecast, you just can't see everything. You couldn't get a better example of that than this. But what you can do is control your immediate sort of way that you live, the way that you look after your body, whether you meditate, what you eat, how you are in your relationships, what you choose to think about, and, sort of giving yourself a break as well, and making sure you sleep properly and all of these things. And I think more than ever in a situation like this where there's so many uncontrollables, if you can just form a few basic healthy habits, and this doesn't mean to say that you only go vegan or you go and have to run marathons. It is literally basic things like the same getting up time, the same decent going to bed time, sleep and all of that. I think it's even more critical, and I think we're going to see it more and more critical. I
mean, it's so true, because obviously, it's quite unnatural in a way for us to be ordered to stay home, isn't it, by government? There's only 4 legal reasons why you can be outside. And of course, things like gyms are closed, and, you can't even take your kids out, say, to a country park, really. You're supposed to just go out to your local park, and even then it should only be a household. So lots of sort of unnatural things going on. I've got to say, although I got this before COVID-19, I think it was a godsend buying that second-hand treadmill from a local gym, because it's now in the garage, and I tell you, it gets a lot of of work, by the whole family. So, absolutely, mind, body, and soul, really important, isn't it?
Really important. And I think, so many people think, oh, well, for whatever reason, I can't exercise, don't want to exercise. But that's like a tiny bit of it, really, for your mental health. So much more of it is about what you're actually putting into your body, how much sleep you're getting. If you get those things even right, and then start thinking about moving your body and, walking up and down stairs, lifting bottles of water, putting a rucksack on and walking up and down stairs. There are ways to do it if you want to do a little bit of exercise. You don't have to become a complete gym bunny, and obviously can't go to gyms at the moment anyway. Sure.
Paige, obviously you're listening to that. Any of that sort of ring a bell for you in terms of students at your college? Obviously the most vulnerable can still come into college, but for most of them, they're also sort of locked down in that home environment. And, for many students, obviously, as well as the courses and the studying, actually being in that community of the college, there are lots of other extracurricular activities, like, for example, probably attending the college gym or fitness hall if you have one. So, how is the college still sort of able to support students, even if it's remotely at the moment?
Well, normally when we're obviously still in the college, teachers especially get to see that early intervention and can notice any signs of any students displaying any sign of any mental health difficulty. So if the student is becoming low, or, they're struggling to stay motivated, or, change the appearance or anything like that. So with these massive changes that have happened, because as well with the college, Stoke-on-Trent College for our students is their safe space. They can identify where our wellbeing area is, where the safeguarding team is, where our counselling team is. So that was one thing, especially throughout the wellbeing team, we wanted to ensure that, we're still promoting the welfare of our pupils and ensure that we can still have a safe space that they can depend on, and, making sure that that's still accessible. And I'd, echo what Angela is saying as well, taking care of, your mind and your body at the moment is really important with staying at home. Many students at the moment are feeling low, unmotivated, worried, anxious. worried about finances or health, because we have adult learners as well. And I think it's ensuring, and what we've been promoting a lot on social media, with the groups that we're doing and the one-to-one sessions, is that, it's remembering that it's important to know that it's okay to feel that the way that they do. And, everybody is reacting so differently at the moment. So, we're trying to normalise that, this situation is temporary, for most of us. Not these feelings will pass. But it's encouraging that the students are aware as well, and for everybody else, that if it is worrying a lot at the moment, that they can seek appropriate support. And, staying at home can be difficult. But like Angela said, if you're struggling, thinking about the things that you can control. So if it's planning those practical things, staying connected with others, talking about your worries and looking after your body as well. So we're trying to encourage a lot of things. Like, we've got Mental Health Awareness Week coming up, and we've got a photo challenge that's running all week. So, Tom and Angela, feel free to join that. Just trying to get everybody, to stay connected, sharing and hopefully motivating others to aspire to sort of, if they're feeling really low today, to, right, that person, I've seen they've done that, and that might make me feel better. And just trying to get everybody together and, looking after themselves as much as we can, really.
Yeah. I mean, as you said there, the lockdown itself is temporary, at least we hope it will be, but the impact of what's been going on dealing with the pandemic, of course, is going to live with us for quite some time to come. And Bank of England today, for example, talking about a 15% drop in GDP over the next 12 months. I mean, that's unprecedented, probably in 3 centuries of the British economy. I mean, Angela, you've often worked closely with ministers and with policymakers, because some of your programs have just been so innovative. They've helped to shine a light on actually things that work. When you look at the potentially impending challenge of youth and adult unemployment, is there anything about your experience at MiddletonMurray and the sorts of programs that you've put together for young people to try and not only get them to a point where they can even join the labour market, but also to keep them in productive jobs as well? I mean, how do you see this whole looming challenge of potential big spike in unemployment over the coming months?
Well, I think many people in the skills sector, many organisations, providers, suppliers, sort of think, oh my goodness, I like doing apprenticeships, or I like delivering traineeships, or whatever it is. And I think that can sometimes be their downfall. It's much better, I think, in a situation like this where you really try to go big picture and you go, right, well, the ultimate client is the government, whether I'm in, commercial training or recruitment, whatever it is. It's what does the country need? And the country's going to need to go get productive again, quit, and they want to do it at speed. So that's the first thing. And then that what does that mean? That means, well, they want employers to get up and running and businesses to get up and running again. And again, I'd go back to the same thing. Well, which businesses and whoever they are is going to be at speed. I think the next thing is to answer that question. Well, what are the mandatory sectors of industry that are going to need to be running quickly? And if you think about what we all needed the minute we went into lockdown, we probably stopped buying, clothes and things like that. But what we still need, we need residential, so everything to do with housing, everything to do with food. We need healthcare. We need technology more than we ever did. If you can't have Wi-Fi, I mean, what could you do? You really would have been stuck. So I think you look at what those mandatory sectors are, because they are going to they still will thrive. They're still thriving now, although they're impacted. They're still in big demand, some more than ever. IT specialists, for example, cybersecurity, that sort of thing. So that's the first thing. Those are the mandatory industries. They're the ones I think where you want to focus, both as a supplier and an individual. And then the next thing is, okay, so now what are going to be the mandatory qualifications within those industries? Because I really think that many businesses, much as they will want to do the right thing, continue with apprentices, I suspect that taking on new apprentices and lengthy courses is not going to be so popular to start off with. They're going to want people with skills that they really need to get up and running. And I therefore think that everybody should be looking at, what are the mandatory industries? What are the mandatory qualifications? How quickly can they be delivered? And I think from both sides of the fence, whether you're a training provider, whether you're a recruiter, or whether you are an actual individual, that's where you ought to be looking. And some of the podcasts that I've done, as you know, with people in high flying careers, well, I've started a new series now, which is Careers of the Future, because I think that there are going to be, you've got to be. This is a new technological era, so. And we've seen how quickly every age can adapt to that. If you just look at how we all are on Zoom now, we've gone from, being a bit unsure and not, muting ourselves, and the video's not on and the Wi-Fi is wrong, and all of a sudden now, I have my whole company on every day, and I'm sure you're seeing it all over the place, big groups, virtual meetings. Sure. We're so proficient so quickly. So I think, as a training provider, you just don't hold on desperately to what you did before, because that was then, and this is going to be very, very different. And
indeed,
if you want to survive and you want to thrive and do the right thing and make the impact and all of these great things, you've really got to start looking bigger picture, what is going to be needed, and try to. I promise I wouldn't use the word pivot, but I'll say it anyway. I think I've heard it every hour for the last 6 weeks. But
right.
You've got to be ready to provide the new demand, I think.
Sure. Well, I mean, the other new terminology that you hear a lot as well is new normal. So you're having to pivot to the new normal. And on that note, Paige, I mean, you close this segment for us then. I mean, where are you, for example, on a continuum of looking ahead and feeling quite pessimistic on behalf of your students for the future, or are you more optimistic? I mean, I'm sure as a wellbeing counsellor, you're probably quite an optimistic person, aren't you?
Yeah, I am feeling quite optimistic, because I feel like, quite quickly we've adapted to these changes. We've been quite resilient, actually. And so, students and staff, we've had to make, a lot of alterations to how we work. We did have some teething problems, like Angela said, Zoom and Teams and things like that were quite, difficult to sort of, help, get used to begin with. But we all keep saying, in the group sessions, especially that I do online through Zoom, I do tea and talk with our staff team. And that's one thing we keep saying is we're all going to be, professionals online when we go back to college. But actually, as long as we know the students are fully aware that we're still there to support them, the best way that we can. At the moment, the colleges, not just in wellbeing, but in other areas, taking a proactive approach to, our vulnerable learners, providing food vouchers for those who are struggling financially. Sure. We're still doing, because I know you mentioned about jobs and employability, we're still doing virtual careers advice, open events, we do free online courses, and our students as well as us, we're all adapting to new technologies, and it's just about trying to, utilise the resources that we have and being proactive with it. But yes, I'm quite optimistic about going back, and it'll be lovely to see all our students and staff, properly
I'm sure
when we can actually go back.
Indeed. Now, look, what I'm really struggling to adapt to using all these new packages like Zoom and Microsoft Teams is, however, how much I try to remind myself to unmute myself before I talk, I'm not quite getting it. And ironically, running this evening community radio show, I haven't yet had a problem with either muting or unmuting my mic. So quite what that says about my technology, I'll never know. Angela Middleton, chair and founder of MiddletonMurray, and Paige Harrison, who's a counsellor and wellbeing coordinator at Stoke on Trent College. Pleasure to talk to you this evening. Thanks so much for joining Skills World Live.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye.
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 You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds, but I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there in the crowd. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. baby, here in my heart. When I'm with you, I feel so much better. Oh, yeah. Before you, I was just a shell, so stuck in the dark. You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my desire. Now all I have to do is to make you mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I know, we're onto something good. You know, and I know, we got something good. Follow your heart, baby, don't be shy. Just follow yours and I'll follow mine. 'Cause I know, and you know what we could be. Like a song, like a perfect melody. Baby, don't say you don't believe in me. 'Cause you know, and I know, we're onto something good. You know, and I know, we got something good. Something good. Something good.
That was Something Good. Another one of those epidemic.com or epidemicsound.com tracks. So joining me on the line now is my day job policy colleague, Dr. Rebecca Conway. Evening, Rebecca.
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Hopefully this line will get a bit better. I know that we appear to have lost our second guest again, who it may be his mobile connection, it may not be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you the first question. Let's just see. Well, let's call him up. Let's see if we can actually get Mr. Ventura on the line now. So just bear with me. This is a first, isn't it, for live radio?
It's like slow TV, but on the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at least people know it definitely is a live show.
Hello, Tom.
Yeah, Mr. Ventura, you're live on
I'm
Skills
live,
World
yeah.
Live. Hi.
Hi,
now,
Tom.
we
Thanks
just seem
for
to have a problem. No, it's your mobile signal, but with a bit of luck, I'm now going to hit merge calls, and hopefully Dr. Conway will come in. Let's just go for that. No, it's failed for some reason. So that means I now have to... Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, Tom.
For some
Sounds
reason,
like it didn't work.
yeah, it's not going to work. It doesn't want to have a three-way conversation on Skills World Live this evening. I'm so disappointed. Look, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to you for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to play a song, and then I'm going to get Mr. Ventura back on the line. But just do it as a one-to-one call. But look, Rebecca, you've had a ringside seat on all the changes to qualifications these past few weeks. What has struck you the most about the pace of change the sector has had to deal with?
Well, I thought it was really interesting what Kirsty Williams was saying about, all the digital kind of innovations. And I think for me, that's been the most striking thing, because all this crazy COVID stuff, before this happened, in March, I went to an event at Ofqual, which was really trying to, it had a lot of kind of people there like teachers and, other sort of education stakeholders. And really, the event was designed to hammer out why, computer-based testing, digital assessment isn't happening yet. And, fast forward 2 months later, and we're being forced to kind of move into this space. So I think that's the really interesting thing for me. These, digital sort of aspects of assessment, which, previously have been so kind of slow on the uptake, now are becoming clear. It's becoming clear that like the only option.
Yeah. And just in terms of the sort of four-country response. I mean, tonight's show is all about what should the UK sector skills priorities be, and I think, as I emphasised at the top of the show, this is a devolved area now, so education ministers, employers, educators will be working on their own post sort of COVID-19 recovery plans. But what's your sense? Because you're quite close, obviously, to the regulators across the UK, and you know quite a bit about some of their forward plans. Obviously, we're in a state at the moment around qualifications where it's all about trying to adapt and calculate grades to not disadvantaged students this summer. But what do you see happening across the UK? Do you see some convergence, or do you think there'll be probably a lot of divergence as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I think in the here and now, there's convergence in terms of it's a pragmatic way forward for the regulators to work together, and it's good for the kids as well to have that coherence. Yeah. Ofqual are sort of taking the lead, and Qualifications Wales, which is a sort of Welsh regulator, and CVER regulation, the Northern Irish regulator, and SQA accreditation, the Scottish regulator, are all meeting weekly and kind of working very closely together on this. And I think that's right. I think all the nations have the same. They have some broad priorities. The desire to move to digital. Before we got into this COVID period, there was obviously a big focus on green jobs. One really interesting piece of work that I think was underway before this COVID-19 period was there was quite a few reports, like the City and Guilds Missing Millions report, which talked about the need to look very closely at different localities and their skills needs, and kind of work on a very regional and local basis. So I think that's going to really be a sort of way in which the home nations all sort of diverge. But I think it will go deeper than that, and I think we'll see different strategies in place, perhaps in the northeast of England compared to the southeast. I think there's a pragmatic convergence, but also some divergences as we seek to kind of, plug the skills gaps and deal with the economic fallout of this bizarre situation we find ourselves in. Indeed. Now, look, I really don't want to let down again our man from the London School of Economics. So what I'm going to do, Rebecca, is... Well, we talk all the time, Tom, so that's fine. We do, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you on air, and I know you'll be back on the show again very soon. So that's Rebecca Conway there from the Federation of Awarding Bodies. Thank you, Tom. Cheers. Bye. Bye. That's called A Place for Us by Howard Harper Barnes. Now, I've got some good news. I actually was able to reconnect with our researcher from the London School of Economics to continue tonight's debate. For some reason, it wasn't possible to do the three-way with my colleague Rebecca Conway, but I'm delighted that we've got Mr. Ventura now on the line. Good evening.
Good evening, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And on air now, can you, because I sort of chickened out of trying to pronounce your wonderful Italian name. So for the benefit of our listeners, tell us what it is.
So it's Guglielmo Ventura. But yeah, Guglielmo is a tricky bit.
Yeah, Guglielmo.
the first.
Okay, I'm going to need Italian language classes, I feel, to get that right.
Just,
to do
yeah,
justice. Anyway, look, it's an absolute delight to finally get you on the show. Now, look, in a recent blog of yours, you said, and I quote, "While the government priority must be to prevent otherwise financially viable firms going bankrupt as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, including training providers, the Department for Education should adopt a strategy to minimise the inevitable disruption to the apprenticeship system in the aftermath of the emergency." When you say the aftermath of the emergency, then what sort of measures do you think the Department for Education now should be looking to put in place?
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote that piece, I was like, I guess the economic consequences of like the actual crisis perhaps look slightly better than like what you than to do now. Because I mean, as you were like briefly like touching on before, it's increasingly looking like the crisis may actually drag on for longer than is expected. So I think that the problem for the skills sector is that, so despite the government's best effort, like keeping sort of businesses like on their feet by like making loans and so on, all the measures that have been taken so far, I think I don't want to be so pessimistic there, but sure. I think there's a risk that many of these businesses might like are bound to like go bust, and even those that are surviving because of this sort of continuous economic uncertainty, they might just be wary about committing to sort of longer training program like apprenticeships, because I guess firms tend to see apprenticeships like a longer term investment, and so economic uncertainties will sort of frighten them. So what I had in mind is that I think it might be inevitable to some extent to have a sort of change of mindset in like the skills sector about how to deliver the skills that both people and businesses will desperately need in the face of the recovery. And that might entail potentially like shifting away from work-based training if it's not possible to sort of match all the would-be apprentices with firms, because there's not enough firms willing to take them on.
Right. So
that was my thought on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say a shift away then from work-based training, because I mean, I thought it was interesting with Angela Middleton on earlier. She was kind of saying actually we need to sort of shift away from full-time courses and maybe towards a more short, sharp sort of type of training. But you seem to be, if I've got this right, you're making the opposite case. You think actually I think less need for that, more need perhaps for just
it's
full-time
not about
education.
needs. I think, I mean, I don't. So in terms of needs, I think apprenticeships offer the best value for learners. Actually, at the Center for Vocational Education Research, which were based at LSE, which is where I work, we have actually done some research back in that, showing that especially for young people, like apprenticeships offer like higher earnings than class-based full-time courses. So actually, I don't think that's what we need. I think that's what we have to sort of rely on. If there's no way for the government to convince and to persuade firms to keep on investing on apprenticeships, despite the sort of kind of economic uncertainty that they face, and despite the fact that there might be so the cash inflows have been sort of decreased, so they have less money to invest. So in terms of what we need, I mean, I want to be clear. I think apprenticeship is they offer the best value, and that also kind of brings me to the sort of longer term challenge, which is, even if we might have to, I mean, I'm not saying maybe we don't have to, hopefully we don't have to, but even if we have to momentarily sort of shift to sort of shorter courses or more full-time courses, I don't know, we'll see what happens. I think there needs to be a strategy in place for the government to actually make sure that this doesn't, that there's no permanent damage to the apprenticeship brand, to the apprenticeship system, because we have seen that happening before. Actually, I mean,
we certainly have. Alas, though,
including in this country, obviously.
Alas, though, we're running out of time on the show this evening, but it's a pleasure to get you on, and I'm sure we'll get you on for further debates in the future. So thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. So, every other night or so, we have a few technical difficulties. Vagaries of a live show. But that's our last formal show, folks, with guests this week because of the bank holiday and the VE Day commemorations taking place over the weekend. Tomorrow, however, I will still be at my radio studio here in the Man Cave in the heart of Sussex. That's right, folks. I'll be temporarily swapping my role as your FE Community Radio DJ with my DJ alter ego, Van Allen. I'll be bringing you a 1 hour continuous mix of all my favourite tracks played on the show so far, including a few new ones from epidemicsound.com. So don't worry, if you want to be on the show, contact us, skillsworld@fenews.co.uk. Thanks as ever to the show's editor, Kelly O'Mara, and our digital producer, Ellie Hansen. Skills World Live is an FE News production supported by the Federation of Awarding Bodies Platinum Partners Programme. You're listening to Skills World Live with Tom Buick. News, views and interviews in association with FE News.